Yo, it's Eddie Ortega. Did you know there's a very simple and effective technique for multiplying and dividing shapes in perspective? What if all I want to do is take an object and find its center point in perspective? Or I want to take an object and duplicate it across space while keeping all the proportions consistent? Well, it turns out this is actually really easy to do, and you don't really even need a whole perspective grid in order to make that work. Let me show you. First, let's talk about division. Let's say I have a rectangle and I would like to subdivide it into quarters, but the thing is actually in perspective, so it's actually kind of hard to find out where those lines should land. In order to understand this concept clearly, let's look at it first without perspective, in orthographic view. Here's a square without any perspective. Now, in order to subdivide any square, all you have to do is draw diagonals between the corners. And this will allow you to find the center point of that square. So in this case, that line right there divides the square in half vertically, and that line divides it in half horizontally. So that means that this little square right here is a proportionate quarter of the larger square. So this square is a quarter of the larger, and you could pretty much do that infinitely. You could subdivide this guy again in half, and this square is a quarter of the next one, and so on. Now, what's cool about this process is that this concept works exactly the same in perspective. If I draw a diagonal right here on this square that's already foreshortened, going down to that vanishing point, I'll be able to find the halfway point between the two. Now, for the horizontal, because we are in perspective, we want to make sure that point moves down towards the convergence point. I missed a little bit, and that's fine. But now, this square right here is both in perspective, proportionally 1/4, divided down. Pretty simple and straightforward, right? Now, if you understand this concept, then we could talk about multiplication, okay? What if, instead of wanting to divide this square down, I wanted to multiply it across in perspective? I wanted to duplicate it here at the same proportion and distance, or I wanted to duplicate it into the horizon. Well, all you have to do is reverse the process of division to find how to duplicate an object in perspective. So let's start again without any perspective, just to show you. If I wanted to just duplicate this object next to itself, all I have to do is find that center point, that division line. And then, if I project the far corner through that center line, I would actually find the opposite corner where that line should go. So, just by following these 2 points, the resulting corner right there is going to be the perfect mirror of the square that was next to it. And the reason for that is because we're doing division but backwards. Notice that this makes a larger square, which if I cross it from diagonal to diagonal, should go right through the center, just like we did with division here, right? So that's all it really is. And what's cool is that once you have that division line found out, this just works infinitely. I could just keep projecting that one corner and finding more and more duplicates of the same square. Now, like I mentioned, this also is just consistent across perspective. So once I have that corner, which in this case I already have, I can just project that corner and find the next square over. So in this case, let's say I wanted to go this way, go like that. Now this square is technically the same size as this one next to it, but it accounts for the foreshortening in this case. And we can just keep doing this. Now this is the classic technique that you could use to maybe put some telephone poles, evenly spaced away from each other, or houses, or whatever you have. And you could also do this to go in the opposite direction. So let's say if I want to put some that are closer to me, I just follow that projection line And this should result in squares that are convincingly spaced apart at even intervals. All right, and that's it. So this technique is actually the basis for a lot of other interesting things that we could do in perspective drawings. And at least for me, it didn't really click until I had seen it separated and out of context. I feel like I always see it in the context of vanishing lines and all these other things for setting up a scene. So just dividing and multiplying rectangles in perspective, you can actually use this to mirror points, create symmetrical arcs, or draw curves that are consistent. And you can even use it to define complex three-dimensional shapes in space. But we'll leave that for another video. Now listen, I'm on a perspective quest. I've been brushing up my art fundamentals, my drawing and drafting skills, sort of the core technical stuff. And I'm making these videos to both cement what I'm learning and to share what I learned along the way in little digestible chunks rather than trying to take on the whole thing at once. If you're interested in any of that, go ahead and subscribe to my channel. You could also check out my other videos somewhere here. All right, I'll see you on the next one. Ciao.